US, I want to draw a distinction between your role and your team and your organization and kind of what people would see stateside, in terms of how that type of system would be run. So Jay, maybe you can speak to how it's affecting your universe.
Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of different clients across a few key industries. So if I think about what we're seeing, generally our clients are continuing to march forward with strategic digital initiatives, albeit with a much more critical eye towards beating up those investments before they make them, and more stringent kind of track of outcomes than maybe we saw 2 years ago, where I think investment was flowing much more freely kind of into the digital domain. But we haven't really seen the slamming on the brakes as much as like slowing down to arguably what is probably a more healthy and sustainable pace. Labor, particularly tech labor, continues to be a constraint for a lot of our clients, although that belt also is loosening. And I imagine will continue to as, big tech basically starts to right-size after their kind of overly aggressive growth during the pandemic. So kind of reaching a normalization state. We'll see how things continue to play out over the course of the next few months, but for now it's kind of steady as she goes in our sector.
Got it. Well, let's thanks, Jay, and let's shift gears just a little bit from how business, I guess, from the business outlook to how business is actually conducted. So, we started to talk about this at the beginning, just a huge transformation in how and where people work. So we looked at our research and the data coming out of the study we just put out. And if you look globally, and once again, there's about 47 countries that were represented, about 18 out of every 100 people in the world were working either in a remote or hybrid setting pre-pandemic. Now it's 54 out of 100. So it's literally tripled in a manner of like 2 to 3 years, which is pretty amazing. And I think obviously there's good that comes from that, and there's also some challenges. So I was wondering if you guys can kind of speak to how that's affecting you. And Silvia, maybe as someone who relies on in-person frontline employees, you might have a different perspective than Jay. So maybe we can start with you.
Yes. So, of course, I absolutely agree with these reports. But first, please let me explain the peculiarity of my company. So, as I explained before, we are more than 7,000 employees, and we can divide the company in two groups. The first one are the employees who work on site or in person, drivers, for example, maintenance teams, customer attendance, attention teams. So in this group, we are around 5,000 people. But our company has also a number of jobs that can work from home, engineers, office staff, for example. So we have chosen a hybrid model for those jobs, 3 days of in-person work and 2 days of remote work. So this is affect the ridership. This is the reason of the ridership. So the 30% of the employees in the company work under the hybrid model. And obviously, if you ask me, you go, okay, how is the new model affect to the ridership? No, the mobility in the city. So the ridership is sensitive to worker mobility changes. We are closely linked to the society. Any changes are clearly visible in metro, even though metro ridership is recovering with unreached pre-pandemic figures on weekdays. Now, I told you, now we have 90% of the ridership if we compare to 2019, or that it's mainly because working from home has taken its tolls. So I wouldn't think this gap in ridership is because more people are using private cars. It's very important because the people think that maybe move to private car, but I think that the fact is working from home, and in fact, ridership recovery goes far better on weekends. So the people use public transport. So it is obvious that working from home has caused a drop in the ridership, and I think that it's the limit. This you can see in all the countries is the same. Here in Spain is the same in the different region of the Spain. Is the same in Paris, in London, and in South America. So I think that pandemic change or the new models for work, and it's going to affect to the mobility in the cities, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And so Jay, maybe you can contrast with Silvia, because you're running and you've been involved in leading up tech companies for a long time. So how are you guys conducting work, and what do you see as the shift, and how do you see it playing out?
Well, in the technology world, I would say that remote work, I mean, as you kind of talk about like 54 out of 100 people working remotely, I think for tech, it's probably quite a bit higher than that at this phase, or at this stage. Although, that pendulum is starting to swing back. So tech was kind of the first one to really embrace and go remote. I think it's one of the last to start to bring people back. And I think, what we've seen is there is a clear productivity gain in remote work as it relates to what I would call tactical work, for particular tech roles like engineers. But there is a drag as it relates to things that really matter for the long term. And those are things like, strategic alignment, employee engagement, mental health, career development. Those things, I think, we're seeing deficiencies in the remote environment. And so that's kind of what's driving the pendulum to come back a little bit more to center.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jay. So when the pandemic hit, the company I was running was doing implementations for hospitals and health systems. And to your point, our productivity went up significantly. We did close to 200 virtual implementations during that time. So that's kind of like a tricky word right now, is how people feel about productivity and actually what it means when they say that. So when we looked at kind of the data overall, I think the biggest takeaway that we had is based on what you just said. There's almost like a crisis of confidence related to culture, right? So there used to be this saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think during COVID, it was having 3 meals a day. So the workplace in many ways has become more transactional, more transient. We've shifted from being more collaborative to being more combative. This movement to bring people back has elevated a lot of animosity, even though it's well-intended. So the narrative is a little different than we thought it would be coming out of this. And Jay, this is picking up on your point and maybe putting some data to it. So the idea that CEOs want to get people back to the office because they're concerned about productivity, to your point, flat out wrong. So our data showed that their concern is related to culture. So getting people the experiences that they need, giving them the opportunity to build relationships that they have in order to grow and learn. So that's a good sign, is that's actually what CEOs are concerned about. So I'm just wondering, like, from your guys' perspective, how are you thinking about culture, and how are you thinking about these issues, and what are you doing differently now than you would have done when everybody was in the office together, in that version of culture, which seems to be fading away? So we can start, whoever wants to jump in.
Go ahead, Silvia.
Well, Metro de Madrid, it's a very popular company. It's a public company, and many people would love to work with us. And Metro is perhaps the most Madrileñan. I don't know if you know what is this word, but it's Madrileña of companies. So, and let me tell you a secret. All the employees that were in that company have a nickname, Metreros. Okay. And the employees say with pride that we are Metreros. It's something that it's something very special for us. And So, well, I told you that we are a public company, and we are a byword for fair employment, and we have always been aware of the importance of corporate culture. During the lockdown, for example, many employees said they miss the corporate atmosphere. I have to say that our work environment is incredible, open and friendly, and though they also so many advantages to remote working. So the hybrid system we follow gets the benefits of both systems. You avoid commuting 2 days and keeping personal touch with your colleagues, with your teams, with your friends, 3 days. So this way we can avoid the feeling of isolation of permanent remote work, and we also relieve the stress of commuting every day. So if you ask me, I think that the employees are really happy under this hybrid model, and really happy because this company, it's amazing. It's amazing. Believe me, it's amazing. It's a very important company for Madrid. Very important for Madrid. You have to understand that we are 100 years old. The company. We start our operation in 1919, more than 303 years. So the people and the employees that works here, well, loves the company, and well, it's very easy.
So in some ways, Silvia, you don't see a change from before the pandemic to now. In your mind, you almost see an improvement. Is that how you would think about it? Interesting. So Jay, maybe you can speak to that. How do you see the difference playing out at Kin and Carta, and the other, I guess your lens on what you see across other companies as well?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. I mean, so we went 100% remote. We've been kind of slow to bring people back, just following the trends in the tech sector, and given how competitive the labor market is, we just got to be sensitive to that. It's interesting. I don't think we've got it figured out yet, to be honest, but I can kind of tell you what some of the things that we're seeing overall. Our employee engagement scores, so we use employee NPS as like our high level dashboard number, along with kind of surveying more details underneath that, like every month. And so we kind of tracked that throughout the pandemic, and our engagement scores are on the whole are as high or about the same, I should say, as they were pre-pandemic. But the areas in which we're kind of scoring are different, and in my opinion, like not as good. Meaning well, so we're kind of, what we're doing right now is we're kind of running a federalist model. So we've got different regions that are able to run different experiments in terms of how they bring people back, and we're kind of collecting that data to formulate an opinion of what the new normal should be. And so we're not, and so we're learning a lot as we kind of run the different experiments in different areas. So in some places like Colombia, which we kind of built out during the pandemic, as a new location, it was 100% remote. They're clamoring to get an office. They want an office. They want that space to go. And so, where in other areas where we've had an office, people are like resisting kind of coming back. So it's different regions are kind of experiencing different things and have different needs. But generally over the last 2 years, we've kind of used our offices more as like a clubhouse, a meeting place for events, employee celebrations, larger in-person collaboration sessions. And that's been somewhat effective. But where we've seen like a degradation in the employee experience is in retention rates for entry-level folks, for example. Like we haven't been able to get them the career development that they've really needed and deserved in a remote environment. Mm-hmm. And the attachment that new employees have coming in a purely remote environment is lessened. When they can just click on a different Zoom link, and arguably get paid, whatever, $10,000 more. I mean, and everything else stays the same. It's like, it's hard to create that differentiation in a purely virtual setting, and right. And we've tried really hard at that. So So anyway, I think that people, to Silvia's point, they value the flexibility. They value having more control over work-life balance. They value having the ability to dictate a little bit more where they perform certain things. But that needs to be coupled with the needs of the business as a whole and kind of the long-term strategic kind of needs of the company as we think about some of those broader things.
Yeah, well, someone asked, did InCommon shift from on-site to remote or hybrid work, and how did this shift affect office space and company culture, et cetera? So here's what I can tell you. For the first 2 years of the pandemic, I was running a company called Strata, and it had been, so this was the end of it, almost like a 10-year run in that business, and we were 100% remote. And I tell you, I really didn't like it. So there was definitely personal benefits, and I think absolutely benefits for people on our team for sure. But what Jay's speaking to is exactly what I was missing, and I think our team was really struggling with, which was this, where are the relationships, where are the experiences, where's the community, where's the sense of opportunity and optimism for the future? It just became very transient and transactional. So at in January, right when the Great Resignation was hitting, we were one of the top probably 20 companies in the world on Glassdoor in terms of culture. And then the Great Resignation hit and we started to drop off. And I was like, my feeling was like, boy, if this is happening at our company, it's happening at every company. And so that's really where I started InCommon, was that every company right now is dealing with this issue in some form or fashion. And maybe there's a way to approach that in a very measured and methodical way. So that's really what I've been working on. So yeah, it hit us in a big way. For people who, Jay, to your point, for people who had been there for a long time, not so much. I mean, they had the relationships, they're a little bit further along in their career, maybe they have young kids, so the value equation is very different for them. For people who are just coming out of school or maybe in that 22 to 28 year old range, yeah, they were kind of coming in and out of the company without ever having met somebody. And if you don't have those relationships, obviously it's not very difficult to leave a company because you're just logging into another website, to your point. So yeah, it's certainly been a tricky time for me personally, and I know for a lot of people very much so professionally. So and that gets to maybe the next point that came out of the survey was just around mental health and employee well-being. So 78% of CEOs report having mental health on the top of their priority list, and almost half have a mental health policy already in place. So I just was curious, maybe Silvia, we could start with you. You mentioned all these great things about your culture and maybe how it made it to the other side of the pandemic, maybe less harmed than others. Has that had to be a priority for you, and how are you guys looking at that issue?
Yeah, we have had mental health on our priority list for years. We have a very active and proactive occupational health department, and our corporate culture is based on the idea of protecting each other and building good teams. So in some cases, we transfer people to departments where they can feel better because health comes first. For us, is very important. We are promoting mental health actions through our internal communication channel. For the employees, is very important. We share the things that happen in the company using this communication channel. And on the other side, our human resources policy encourage a human perspective. We tend to choose leaders with an extra human touch, because people in charge of others need to care about them. And I want to say that in 100 years of history of this company, I am the first woman that was in this position, like CEO of the company. And I think that maybe we change maybe we use different model for of leaders, no? Maybe we think that there are other things that are important in the company, like to work besides our team and our company and work together, and and I think that it's things change obviously, and but I think that it's better and it's better. My employees, for example, I am going to start to negotiate the new union agreement, and I think that my employees are going to ask me one another day to work from home. So I think that it's a good model for the employees. So I think that it's the secret, the new models, and to take care of our employees is the most important thing of the company.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I was having a discussion with somebody the other day on this topic, and a little bit of a debate. But I said, there should be one single goal for CEOs that applies to running their company relative to their team. That when people, if or when people leave the company, they said that was the best job I ever had. And if you focus on it in that fashion, well, people's personal and professional are more integrated now than they've ever been. At least we're more, open about that and aware of it, I would say. But the question is if you're going to have someone have a great work experience, obviously you have to be very mindful of how it's affecting them personally, right? So, to your point, and Jay, I know you've been focused on these kind of issues at Kin and Carta. You guys have been really a global leader, in how you're thinking through some of these problems over time. So I think it would be really great if you could share some of the things that you guys have done and personally how you think about the issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, employee well-being overall is one of the pillars of our employee value proposition. And we have some, slightly different benefits in different countries, but generally we support and pay for mental health help whenever employees need it. We encourage and support time off for mental health reasons. We train employees as mental health first aiders. Particularly in Europe, there's a great program around that. And it's really one of the primary focuses of our internal training and kind of lunch and learns and those sorts of things. I mean, there's definitely been more of an emphasis on it over the last, 3 or 4 years. And I think it's twofold reasons, one positive, one negative. I think the positive side of it is there's, the stigma around needing help for mental health is lifting. I think it's just becoming more commonplace to recognize that, just like our bodies, our brains are not perfect, and we need help sometimes to get them sorted out. And people are more comfortable kind of talking about that now, and that's a really good thing. So I think that's a positive trend. The negative trend, I think remote work has really exacerbated a lot of issues globally from a mental health standpoint. And humans are tribal. They need to feel like they're part of a tribe to feel fulfilled. If they don't have that tribal connection in other parts of their life, the office really does provide a great opportunity to make those social connections. So I'm not saying that everybody needs that, but a lot of people do. And when they don't have that, it shows up in some of these other, challenging ways. The other thing I think that you mentioned, I just wanted to emphasize, Dan, that because I agree with it strongly, is like, I have always fundamentally believed that the strength of a company's culture is directly proportional to the number of meaningful social connections at that organization. And I've seen that play out over decades. And when you talk about people saying like that was the best job I ever had, it almost always correlates with the number of meaningful social connections they had at that business. And that that's really hard to do online. It's really difficult to form those same level of bonds and connections in a completely virtual environment. So I think that's another reason why that, and the mental health kind of reasons, is why that pendulum's starting to shift back.
Yeah, well, the one thing we know for sure about depression is isolation and depression have a direct correlation. So I think your point is definitely supported by all the data that shows the correlation between those two things. The question is like, what do you do about it, right? So relationships are formed based on two things: discovering what you have in common, but then also sharing common experiences, right? And being able to dive deeper with people. So one of the things that we've been working with people on is just when you bring people together, being very intentional. Like you would have had an opportunity to build those relationships organically in the past, right? People are working next to each other 5 days a week. It's going to happen at some point or not, if that person wishes to engage or doesn't, right? But at least you're setting up, based on proximity, the opportunity for that to occur. Now with people coming in, Sylvia, even 2 to 3 days a week, there's less opportunities for those, collisions to happen. And so we are working on how do you construct opportunities and experiences that bring people together, allow them to dive deep very quickly and understand their connection. So all three of us have dogs. That is how a lot of relationships begin, is by understanding they have kids the same age. Maybe you both have pets, maybe you both are gamers, maybe you both watch Game of Thrones. But there's some common link that begins that relationship. So I interviewed every single person for 10 years that came into our company, and I did every exit interview, and it was to drive that idea of connection. And I can tell you, for sure, that the only thing that people said coming in and going out that was identical was it's the people, right? So I wanted to join your company because of the people I met. I wanted to stay there, or I feel bad about leaving because I'm going to be leaving people. It's an obvious thing, but culture really drives strategy, and culture can be a strategy. Sylvia, to your point, and Jay, I know you guys have really put that front and center for a long, long time in terms of the growth of Kin and Carta. So now let's, and we're moving into a new year, so fresh start. So let's look to the, I don't know, whether you want to look 3 years ahead or 5 years ahead.
Dan, there is a question in the chat that is there a benefit for all other company with established culture in retaining and recruiting talent?
Yeah,
I want to ask you because Jay and Dan, because in my company is it's not the same because we are a public company, and I think that the people is difficult to explain what is the model to recruiting talent, because I have to I cannot go to the market to recruit talent. But in your company, the new model of work and the culture, do you think that is going to or can be good to recruit, especially the young talent? Because I think that the young people want another things, for example, to more time. I think that is not the same. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Jay, you want to go first?
Sorry, Sylvia. So what the question was as it relates to young talent and recruiting young talent, what was the question?
So what do you do to what is the strategy of your company in order to recruit talent? I think that it's a big problem in the companies now.
Yeah, I mean, our calling card for younger talent has always been, we're in a high growth company in a high growth industry, so it offers the opportunity for accelerated career paths, a strong culture and support around the accelerated development of someone's career path. That's always been the calling card for how we bring young recruits in, coupled with a really strong social responsibility agenda, which is really meaningful, particularly for Gen Zers, and kind of being an active company in some of the different ESG domains. So those two things have really helped. I think from an ESG standpoint and a D&I standpoint and a sustainability standpoint, remote work has been sort of beneficial for all of those things in a lot of ways. So that's been something that we've been able to kind of champion even further. But on the career development standpoint, and on the culture and support standpoint, and on that accelerated career path standpoint, even though we've experienced that high growth, it's just been harder to fulfill those promises for entry-level folks when the organization's been more primarily remote. So that to me is that's kind of the opportunity of how we need to continue to evolve the organization and kind of get back to more of a healthy balance point. And so specifically around that, the question that was presented around, is there a benefit for older companies with established cultures and retaining and recruiting talent? I would say yes, depending on the culture. If it's a good, strong culture, it's incredibly beneficial to be able to bring people into that. But if it's not, and it needs to change and modernize, then potentially it's a negative.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I'm not sure I'd add a lot to that. The one thing that I would say, having spent a lot of time looking at this issue over the last 6 months to a year, is this is probably the biggest change in how we work and live and how those two things integrate ever. So it's going to play out over a period of time. And you can see the dramatic shift. 3 times as many people in this world working in a different setting than they did, 3 years ago. And I think that the data is it takes 66 days to form a new habit. Well, I think it's been 982 days since the pandemic was officially started in March of 2020. So, people's not only professional but personal lives have really changed. So, Silvia, when you bring up, recruiting people who are maybe in their 20s and making that your company an attractive destination, boy, do you need to think differently than you did before, right? And young people are looking for those experiences. They are looking for those social connections. And there's a little bit of a generational, I almost say animosity and almost like a misread that people don't want to work or we need to bring them back to work. The main thing is that companies need to think about not how we bring people back, but how do we bring people forward and create a vision that's really exciting that people want to be part of. So I don't think you can rely on an established culture or an old culture anymore. I think that maybe is a false premise unless you have a company that is very much on site, has been on site, will be on site. And so they're walking into the same thing that someone would have walked into 3 years ago. Now, when someone joins a company, they're walking into something completely and totally different, where they're not sharing those elements of culture, those norms, those behaviors, those experiences in the same way they did before. So it's somebody else's culture. It's not necessarily theirs. And I think Jay's, your point is the right one, which is it's different and it really just depends. So thinking about that and kind of what we need to do moving forward, like how does this all play out, over the next few years? So if you look into your crystal ball for the next 5 or 10 years, how do you think things will shift or be different than they are even today? Silvia, maybe we could start with you.
Oh, well, it's 10 years ago, for example, within what is going to happen in 10 years, for example. Well, the last 3 years, we have seen how the world has changed quickly. So anyway, it's very difficult it's very difficult. So I'll try to make a forecast. First for employees, I think that our employees will expect a better work environment, enabling them to fulfill both their professional goals and their personal commitments. So this balance will boost productivity and engagement and will prevent mental health issues. So for leaders, I think that we need leaders that improve the soft skills. There are many leaders with good professional skills, but we need that they really care for the human factor. So in our company, we know that the most important thing are the employees. And Metro cannot be Metro without our employees. And we bear in mind that our employees has aspirations and life to live. So leaders are responsible for promoting the best possible work environment and keep on engaging employees in the common effort. So I expect that the best company will have a committed workforce with effective leadership, and this will have emerged and share the best possible ideas and practice, promoting this way the progress on the company. So only the companies with the best corporate culture will be able to forge lasting and productive corporate alliances. So I think that is the two most important keys, and I think that the company in the future, or maybe the next year is going to be like that, no?
Well, it's interesting, Silvia, so the way you said that, because it's basically saying that if you're looking at your strategy for 2023 through 2025 and beyond, and if you don't have culture in the definition of the deliverables relative to that strategy at the top of your list, you're going to struggle, is basically what you're saying. And I think that's really well said. And Jay, how would you add to that, or maybe what would you add on top of that?
I mean, I think meta trends, like if you really want to think about 10 years out, I think artificial intelligence and the rise of AI is going to continue to automate a lot of like tactical assignments and work. And the areas where humans really shine, like collaboration, qualitative reasoning, strategic planning, mentorship, support, like management, like Silvia's talking about. I mean, that's going to become critically more important. It's going to require more collaboration than ever. And so I do think like technologies like VR and the metaverse are going to continue to mature, and they're going to become closer to providing these experiences virtually, but I don't think they're going to be able to replace physical in-person experiences. And, the tech workforce is going to continue to expand globally. We're going to see, continents like Africa to, really come online as future tech hubs, and things like VR are going to really help bring distributed teams together, but that's going to need to be coupled with local in-person culture in order for companies to win, like Silvia is saying. So I think that's kind of directionally where we're headed. I mean, Dan, what's your perspective on this? I know you guys are really focused on this transition and what's coming next.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what we're trying to think through is, okay, how do you take that idea and translate it into a strategy, right? And so what we did is research on what are the things that correlate the most with someone feeling part of a culture and feeling connected. And the output of that would be engagement, productivity, and retention, right? So the three things that people speak to a lot when they think about the degradation of culture. What's the impact of it? A lot of times they speak to those outputs. So there's really four things that correlate the most. One is, and Silvia, this goes to your point, community. Do they feel a sense of belonging? So when you talk about Metro, you're like, boy, I forgot the term you used, but there's a term for everybody who works there. So they're part of a community. That sense of belonging is inherent in the school we go to, the community we live in, a company we work for. So that sense of place, incredibly important, and that people feel like they belong. The second one is opportunity. They feel like there's a future. They're working towards something. There's a reason to stay. The third one is relationships. So exactly what we have been speaking to is, I mean, Jay, you said it incredibly well. The correlation is amazing. In fact, attrition drops by 50% if you have 2 to 3 friendships at work. And the last one is experiences that help you grow, that are rich, which you can't get when you're isolated or where you're remote, which is really the problem to be solved. So those 4: community, opportunity, relationships, and experiences, the acronym is CORE. And so we built a model that helps people, one, measure that, and two, manage those issues longitudinally over time. Think of it like turning culture into a service, like CAS, culture as a service, or thinking of culture as a platform. So it's I think, to me, it's like an opportunity of a lifetime for leaders to lead, because this is the most complex pivot and quickest shift in how work works ever. So to me, that's something that's really exciting, and we've been spending a lot of time on it. So as we wrap up, maybe just a quick response, because we only have a few minutes. So if you had to capture in a minute, super important that people feel like they're part of a group now and engage in groups because they have been isolated for so long. So one of the groups that obviously the three of us are involved in is YPO. So maybe you can give a reflection on what it's meant to you personally being part of a peer group, and whether someone's going to join YPO or another type of peer group, how that can be helpful for them in both their personal and professional growth. So Silvia, why don't we start with you?
So I joined in YPO in March this year. So during these months, I have discovered that YPO is a window open to the wide world. So it doesn't matter how different we are, how different our countries or our culture are. So we are all united in the common goal of sharing ideas. So my experience in YPO has made me go further, and it has made me a better person and a better leader. Now I have friends in YPO. I have colleagues, and it's a place to share the problems that I have in the company. And YPO is my family, but it's not only my family, and also it's the family of my family. So, for my 2 daughters and for my husband, but not for my dog. No yet, no yet for my dog. But well, for me, it's amazing. to have the opportunity to be in this community, this amazing community, because it's something very different, and I can share my experience and I can share my problems, and it's my family. So I'm really, really happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Silvia. And Jay?
Yeah, this could be a discussion all on its own, but I mean, YPO's definitely had, I'm 10 years in now. It's had an outsized impact on almost every area of my life. So the support I've gotten from other members and growing my business, navigating kind of the balance between work and family, providing amazing educational experiences for me and my wife and my kids. It's unmatched. I tell every CEO I meet that they should join, hands down.
Yeah. And Jay, any thoughts just for people who aren't running a company, or people just, who haven't been involved in other peer-based groups? So maybe how you guys have seen that play out at Kin and Carta amongst your employees who are joining other groups outside of the company. Just any kind of words of wisdom from the benefit of that, just in general.
Well, from the benefit that I've gotten through this, I've encouraged all of my direct reports to kind of seek out and find similar peer organizations for their areas of specialty. I think it's been, it's incredibly valuable. And I've had, my old CFO started a peer group because there wasn't one that he could find that became extremely valuable for him. And I just think, in this time, connection's more important than ever. And getting out of our own bubbles and learning and hearing experiences of others is unmatched.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, thank you, Silvia, and thank you, Jay. Appreciate the opportunity to have a cup of coffee with you guys, talk about dogs and and all of the kind of hopes and desires as we kind of head into the future. So you guys are obviously wonderful leaders and role models, and so we really appreciate your time, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. One thing I would ask is just share this information. So share us on Facebook or LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube, so people can hear both what we shared today, and then also at future episodes in the future. So I'm Dan Michelson. This was YPO Presents Ask the Experts, and we had two great ones with us today. So thanks everyone for joining, and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks again to Jay and Silvia. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Silvia.
Thanks so much. Nice.
Bye, everyone.